we're going to go through the RPA today, and we're going to talk about the changes. But like I was telling Phil, I have never gone through line by line these forms. So I think this is going to be a really good exercise. I have a couple of resources. I've pulled up Forms Tutor because I want you all to be able to use that. That's a very good tool for when you have nobody to ask and you really want, you really need to know the answer. All right, so I'm sharing my screen here. All right, there we go. So we'll just start at the beginning. This first page, let me back up. When zip forms, when the CAR, the California Association of Realtors, wrote these forms, because they wrote every single one of these forms, they did it in cooperation with attorneys because they needed forms that everyone can use that would assure some amount of stability before a judge, right? So these were all written in collaboration with attorneys. And as long as we use them properly, they will stand in a court of law. It's when we try to modify them, we write our own addendums, that's when things can get sticky. But if you use the forms as they're intended, then you're pretty much going to be okay. Okay, so secondly, when they put these forms into zip forms, they put them in a user-friendly manner. What I mean by that is if you look at the, oh, George is here. If you look at the RPA, I just pulled up the RPA right from the forms library in zip forms. And it's actually a group of forms. It isn't just the RPA, it's a package. The reason they're packaged that way is because the main contract, the RPA, references these other forms. So in the contract itself, it says, this form has become part of this contract. And instead of making you add them yourself, they just put them in a packet. So when you fill out the RPA, you want to fill out every other form that is in that packet to constitute a complete contract package, right? And I'll show you where they do that when we get there. So this first form, it's a 2-page form. You can tell what the name of the form is by looking at the bottom line. It'll say disclosure regarding real estate agency relationship AD, page 1 of 2. So it's giving you the form name AD, and it's telling you how many pages are in this form. Now, if you notice down here, this little box right here, this is just because I am using it out of my own account. It lists my name here and my phone number and the address of the property folder that I'm working out of. This is just for you. It also gives my company name and the address. So this is just good information. Sometimes you're going through forms and they all start to look alike. And if you ever need to organize them, you could always refer to the bottom. It'll tell you exactly where it came from. All right, so the first form is the AD, the disclosure regarding real estate agency relationship. Now, if you remember your test and your real estate exam, this is one of the questions. When must you deliver the disclosure regarding your real estate agency relationship? So you have a duty to inform everyone who's a party to your transaction that you are the agent for your client. So because you have to make that assertion before you hand them your offer, it's before you actually fill out the offer. So it's kind of in a timing order as well. So they're pretty ingenious how they do this stuff. So pretty much this disclosure, it outlines the your responsibility if you're the seller's agent, your responsibilities if you're the buyer's agent. If you're an agent representing both buyer and seller, these are your responsibilities. And then here's the seller and buyer responsibilities. So it's a really good idea. It also references the civil codes that that require that this disclosure be made, and that's down here. This disclosure form includes the provisions. I don't know why my mouse isn't working. Okay, inclusive of the civil code set forth on page 2. Read it carefully. I would always recommend that you tell your clients to please read the forms. I know it's tedious, but you need to be the good example that they need to follow. And when we put a form in front of somebody and just say, sign here, sign here, sign here, sign here, you are actually teaching them how you feel about the form, right? And if you're not caring about it, if you're not showing them it's important to read this form, then guess what? They're never going to read any of your forms. They're going to take from you the lead on that. So it's very important when you give them the document that you need them to sign, at the very least, point out these headers and ask them to please read it later. Of course, you're not going to sit there and wait for them to read it, but you can send it ahead of time so that they can read it beforehand. Give them that opportunity. When we arrive with the forms ready for their signature and we don't allow them time to read it, then that's not really fair to them either, because you're expecting them to sign it right there. And they're probably too polite to say, hang on, let me read this. So it's always best if you send the contract out ahead of time and say something like, I'm sending it out ahead of time so that you have a chance to read what you're signing. Let them know that's important to you and it's important for them. Okay?
Hey,
All right.
Bobby, the one thing
Yeah.
I'd say with that, because there's so many attachments in the packets,
Yeah.
especially like whether it's the RPA or the listing agreement, or even later on when you're doing disclosures, there's so many bundled together.
Yeah.
In the beginning, when it's like the RPA or even like a BRBC, when you're doing the agreement to work with them, that's a packet too, right?
Yeah.
Or the listing agreement, that's a packet, and this has all these disclosures out there. Even if you don't go through the disclosures, I think it is helpful to at least maybe just quickly tell them, hey, this one is about this topic, and here's why that's important to you. Just giving them like one little thing that tells them why that disclosure is important to them or how it protects them. You don't have to tell them
Right.
everything that's on it, but just give them like a quick little something about that one, and then something about the next one, and then say you can go through and read it all, but that's basically why we put that in there for you, right?
Yeah.
Just
Yeah.
to like give them a benefit of each one that is for them,
Yeah.
rather than try
Yeah.
to
And that's
explain the whole form.
right. And that shows that you're familiar as their agent, that you're familiar with the form also. And that's a huge thing too. They don't want to be signing something that you don't even know what you're asking them to sign. And a lot of times newer agents, not having read the form, will be in that situation. So please take the time to read it so that you can do that. So you can point out, this is important because X, Y, Z, right? So thank you, Monica. That was perfect. All right, let's move down through this form and then we're going to, now we've arrived at the California Residential Purchase Agreement and Joint Escrow Instructions. I want to point something out. We do have Louisa here as our escrow officer and office manager. When it says joint escrow instructions, that is a bit misleading because escrow will still have to do their escrow instructions. I would say the reason why it says joint escrow instructions is this is what escrow will take their instructions from. Not necessarily can it also act as the escrow instructions. It's more about this is the information that the instructions will be written from. Am I getting that?
That is
correct?
correct, 100%. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. All right, so we're gonna start at the top. Date prepared. Think about this date prepared as a document number, right? Because all throughout your transaction, you're going to identify this offer from any other offer by that date prepared date, right? So whatever the date you're preparing, it doesn't really matter because it doesn't have to do with timing. It doesn't have to do with the number of days, the contract days. It more has to do with identifying this offer from an offer that was written yesterday or tomorrow. So just make sure that you use, when you reference this particular RPA, you're using the correct date, the date prepared date. All right, an offer from, this is where your client's name goes. Property to be acquired, this is the property address, situated in the city, county, and zip. And then your assessor's parcel number goes here. There is a way to connect your MLS listing to zip forms so that this is auto-populated. We'll go over that a different day, or I can show you that at another time. All right. All right, so number C, the terms of this purchase are specified below and on the following pages. D, buyer and seller are referred to herein as the parties. Brokers and agents are not parties to this agreement. That is very important. You are not a party to the agreement. You have no interest in any side of this. Therefore, when you're wondering what you should do, how you should, move forward, that's up to your client. It's all up to your client. Ask them how they want to proceed. You are there to guide them, to give them information for them to be able to make decisions. You don't make any decisions yourself. If a lawsuit were to come about as a result of this document, are you going to court? No, it's not between you. You are not a party to the transaction, period. Okay, moving on. 2, agency, disclosure. The parties each acknowledge receipt of a disclosure regarding real estate agency relationship. That was a form CAR AD. Remember I said you had to give it to them first? This is why. If represented by a real estate licensee. Now, to use this form, you don't, a person does not necessarily have to be working with a licensed real estate agent, but it's pretty difficult to get this form if you're not. So it's actually against the rules to give this form away to anyone. Sometimes you'll have clients ask you, do you have a lease agreement that I can get from you? And you'll be like, yeah, I'll just give them the zip form one. No, you will not. No, you will not. There's plenty of rental forms on the internet. You just pull one off of there. These are not to be given to the general public. They're for you to use and you alone. All right. Buyer's agent is not legally required to give to seller's agent the AD form signed by buyer. Seller's agent is not legally obligated to give buyer's agent the AD form signed by seller. Do you understand what that means? So if you're the buyer's agent, because you're writing the RPA, you are not legally required to give the seller's agent, this AD form signed by the buyer. That's confusing.
These are the new changes as of June, that's why.
Yeah, so why, I mean, why aren't they obligated?
Yeah, that's the new rule.
So this is part of the new rules.
2026.
I have the red line version.
Yeah.
Let me look at that. Hang tight, I'm gonna get you an answer here. Okay, no, that's not part of the new changes. No. No, this was already on there. So, so you're only obligated. Buyer's agent is not legally required to give seller's agent the AD form signed by the buyer.
They're just
That is
saying
so-
that the AD that's for your side of the transaction stays with your side. You don't have to provide it to the other side. It's
Oh,
It's
just a
not-
confirmation of you and your working relationship with your own client. So really,
Okay.
escrow is the only one that needs to see this.
Gotcha. Okay. All right, moving along. Confirmation. The following agency relationships are hereby confirmed for this transaction. You have to be very careful to check these boxes. So you are the seller's brokerage firm is, you want to put that in there, license number. And then you want to say whether this firm is working for the seller or for both the seller and buyer in a dual agency situation. Be sure to click those boxes. They don't automatically fill in for you. Even when you do a form, if you connect the form with the MLS, it still won't check the boxes. So be sure you check the boxes. All right, buyer's agent. Nope, this isn't new either. Buyer's agent, you want to put right here. Oh, okay. No, this is part of this. Okay. All right, C, more than one brokerage represents the seller or buyer. See additional broker's acknowledgement, CAR form ABA. So let's say that you're working with a buyer who is also working with another agent, and the two of you are working together, but the other agent isn't with your brokerage. That's when you would use the ABA form to show the different brokers that are working on this transaction. That's not a common situation. And then if this does apply, you want to definitely add the CAR ABA. But here's what's cool. If you do click one of these boxes, it's automatically going to throw this form into your transaction. So it gets it ready for you. All right, potentially competing buyers and sellers. The parties are advised to discuss with their agent the broker's policy on dual agency and multiple representation of competing buyers and sellers. This is new. So this D was not here before. So what they're asking you is to explain your broker's policy on dual agency. So it's kind of putting this responsibility back onto the brokers. So I want to tell you what our policy is on this so you'll know what to say. So our policy on working with buyers and sellers is that it's very difficult for two competing sides to work with one person. If it can be avoided, then please avoid it. You can always do a referral to another agent. You can get a referral fee by referring that other side out to another agent. But keep in mind, if you refer that to another agent within your own brokerage, it's still called a dual agency because the dual agency applies to the broker, not the agent level. So our policy on a dual agency where two of the same, two different agents from the same brokerage are working on a transaction, I am fine with that. The point is that each party to this transaction without the fear of a conflict of interest. So that's our policy on a dual agency. Now, there are situations where dual agency just makes sense. A situation might be where a buyer and seller have already found themselves and they really just need you to do the paperwork and get through escrow. They've already made the deal. In that situation, I'm fine with that because they've really done the heavy lifting. They know the price, they know what, in fact, I did one last year. The buyer and seller had already made the arrangements. The buyer had already said to the seller, I'm not going to ask for you to make any repairs. I've lived in this house for 20 years. It was a situation like that. So when there's nothing to negotiate, then it's totally fine for one person to do that transaction because you're probably gonna do it for a lesser amount because you're not showing the house, you're not doing a lot of the things that agents have to do when they're working with a seller or even a buyer. So if you're taking a lower fee for that, then there's really no problem with doing a dual agency. All right, terms.
Bobby, by the way, too, like the reference in that paragraph, it's referencing the PRBS, right? Which is one of the attached items that's in the packet. It's one of the attached disclosures in the packet. It's the possible representation of more than one buyer or seller disclosure.
Yeah.
And that one mentions the dual agency, but what it also mentions is that what they're basically saying is the brokerage, California Curb Appeal, might represent more than one buyer or seller at any given moment.
Yes.
Period. Which is always going to be the case. In other words,
Right.
the brokerage might represent more than one buyer on this transaction, more than one buyer on multiple transactions, more than one seller on multiple transactions. It's just saying that we represent other people besides you, the person who is signing this form.
Thank you for that. Yeah.
It not only covers the dual agency part, but it's just making it clear, like you are not our only client. We represent other clients too, and their interests also.
Yes.
So they really need to be clear about that. Also, if, like, for example, you're working with a seller and all of a sudden at a open house, a buyer shows up who wants to buy the house, but they don't want to be represented. They want to do the deal and they want you to do the paperwork, but they don't actually want representation, right? So it's just a time to like bring that kind of stuff up. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
When you're talking about it. It's just
Yeah.
it's an opportunity to like make them understand that. And
Right.
the attachment that comes with it basically says the same thing.
Yeah. Thank you for that. I didn't even think about that, but yeah, that's exactly what it says. It says that we represent other buyers and sellers. So there might be somebody that our company is representing on the same house that could be negotiating. So thank you for that.
But
and we'll,
can I add though?
Yeah.
But I want to piggyback on what you said about the dual agency thing. That is, it's both 2 and 1 that they're referencing there. And I think it's most important if you're ever dealing with the dual agency situation that is, because I think most people understand that you're working with different buyers and sellers because we're realtors and that's what we do. But what they don't understand is dual agency. So if anything, you always want to disclose that dual agency because that's what will get you into litigation more so. Because they'll say, wait a minute, how did you this was in-house. This was in-house, then both sides were doing it. Was I really fair? Was I really fairly, represented? So that's, if definitely you want to take note of that.
Yeah.
That's me.
When in
When I do
doubt-
it, when in doubt, just goes. So, and to piggyback on what Bobby was saying is, the dual agent, when it does happen, to disclose that. So, I would double disclose that, like, especially where you're representing both parties, that they're fully aware that you're representing both parties.
Mhm.
You want to double disclose that. Because there's always a problem. We're in real estate. So the problem always comes after escrow closes.
Absolutely. All right. Okay, so now we're getting into the terms of the purchase and allocation of costs. The items in this paragraph are contractual terms of the agreement. Referenced paragraphs provide further explanation. This form is 17 pages. The parties are advised to read all 17 pages. Okay, so A, purchase price, check here if it's all cash. B, close of escrow. You get two choices. You can put the number of days or you can reference a date. Always check with the lender on this one. If your client is looking for some sort of down payment assistance, that could add days onto your escrow. If your buyer is a VA buyer, that might take a little extra time. Just work with the lender, clear it with him or her on the number of days. C, expiration of offer. Now, these contracts are great because they have a default. If you don't put something there, it'll default into something that is usually okay. So the default on this is 3 days after all buyers' signatures. So if you don't put anything there, it's going to expire in 3 days. And it does say here 3 calendar days. So just take note of that because some days are business days and some days are calendar days. In this particular instance, these are calendar days. Okay. All right. D1. Okay. So also here, if you'll see this little box here, this column right here is referencing a paragraph number so that you can always go back and read what is in this paragraph. The paragraph title or contract term is right here. Here's the term or condition, and these are additional terms. So that's organized this way to help make this clearer and help you to better explain to your client and your client to better understand. All right, initial deposit amount. It has a dollar amount, and then once you put the dollar amount in, it'll give you what percentage that is. Now, what's the typical deposit amount? I would say between 1 and 3%. I would caution anyone not to make the deposit too large. I had a situation where the deposit was $50,000 and I thought, oh, that's really good. It's going to show what a strong buyer I have, blah, blah, blah. No, the minute we canceled, they tried to say that we were out of, what did she say? It wasn't compliance. It was, that we were somehow trying to get an unfair deal or something, but it was just BS. They were just trying to get their little hands on the money. I don't know what it is about people. They see that many zeros, it changes their thinking. So be careful. If you want to cap it at 2 or 3%. And then yes,
With escrow here, Louisa, to my understanding too, when you have a deposit in, it has to be signed by both parties to release it, right?
Yes.
So if you're in, so that's another reason why you want to pay attention to the earnest money that you put in, because either party can hold it up if you decide to not move forward for any reason. Because escrow can't release it unless both parties sign off on it.
buyer and seller.
Yes.
Yeah, and that's how mine was held up,
Mhm.
and I ended up having to hire an attorney
Yeah.
because they were just not signing.
Mhm.
They wouldn't release it, so they kind of can hold your money hostage.
Mhm.
So you just want to make sure that, you know, when you're taking those or when you're negotiating the deposits, that, you know, just not make it too high.
If you're representing the buyer, you go
Yeah.
as low as you can. If
Absolutely.
if you're representing the seller, you get as much as you can.
There you go. Exactly. You got it. All right, and then if there is an additional term, always look and see what it is. So, on this one, they're asking, what's the timing on this deposit? Are you gonna get it over to escrow within 3 days? Or after the acceptance by wire transfer? Or what? So it used to be that your buyer would give the deposit money to their agent. We don't really do that anymore. It's just much safer to allow your buyer after acceptance to deposit the money directly with escrow. That way it's not going through more hands than necessary. If they give it to you, then you have to log it, hold it, give it to escrow, who also logs it and holds it. So we take out the middleman and we let our buyers know that they can deposit their deposit with escrow within 3 days of after acceptance. So we'll get to that timing in a bit, but just remember that. And if you don't put anything here, this defaults to within 3 business days after acceptance by wire transfer. That's what you're saying. So unless you change something, you're already agreeing within 3 business days after acceptance by wire transfer. All right, if there's an increased deposit, then you would check this box. Why would you have an increased deposit? Well, let's say that your buyer doesn't have, you know, even 1%. And you know, you want to make this offer stronger. So you're gonna say that your buyer's gonna increase the deposit at some later date. So if you check this box, this addendum already populates into your folder, and it's the IDA form, so increased deposit addendum. And then you would fill that out too. All right, loan amount. You're gonna put the amount of the loan. If you don't know how to calculate that, it's real easy. If your buyer is using a 3% conventional, then it's just 3% minus the deposit. If they're getting an FHA loan with a 3.5, then same thing. It's 3.5% of the purchase price minus the deposit. If you need help with that, I'm happy to help. You put in the amount of the loan and it will give you the percentage. So if you're doing an FHA loan, this percentage should be 3.5. You'll know if you got it right, if you're getting the correct percentage, because this populates once you put something here. So if you're doing a 3% conventional, this number should be 3%. Otherwise, you've got your calculations incorrect. All right, so if it's a fixed rate, then you do nothing. If it's initial adjustable rate, you're gonna click this box here, and then you're gonna put the not to exceed percentage. On all adjustable rate loans, you will have a cap. So you're just gonna put the cap in right there. Buyer to pay up to blank points to obtain the rate above. So with some lenders, the buyer can buy down his rate. And points just means percentage. So maybe your buyer's buying down 1 percentage point. To get this special rate, you want to fill all that in. as much as possible. If you need to reach out to the lender, do so. Whenever I submit offers, I'm doing it with my lender. It's not anything but a partnership at this point, because your lender, when you're submitting offers, is very important to the deal. He can make or break it, because you want that lender to reach out to the seller's agent and say, hey, this is a well-qualified buyer. We're not going to have any issues. It's going to be so smooth. Boy, sellers just love hearing that. So you want to do this with your lender. So your lender should be on the other line when you're filling this out.
But
All
I
right.
do have a question,
Yeah.
because I don't fill that out, and the
Uh-huh.
reason I do put the first, obviously you have to put the first.
Yeah.
And then you have to put if it's FHA or whatever. But besides that, I don't fill that out because I didn't want to be binded to that. Is it binding?
Oh, well, I wouldn't say so, because none of,
Like, because
Right.
it can change,
Yeah.
it can change.
It becomes binding once escrow prepares the
Right,
actual
that's
lender
what I
rate term
was-
amendment. That's when it becomes binding, because we take the direct instruction from the lender's instructions.
Mm-hmm.
So therefore, we kind of modify the RPA with our escrow amendment for the lender rate term. So that's when it becomes binding. So
I don't
in the
think-
very beginning, it's kind of like, it's like kind
Yeah.
of like a pre-approval.
Yes,
That's how it's interpreted, as a
Mm-hmm.
pre-approval, and then it becomes like final lender rate and terms at the time
Sure.
of signing, of closing.
Oh, well, so you're gonna change it anyway, so
Yeah.
no, it wouldn't be
We amend it
binding.
regardless.
It's kind of like in the opening instructions, and then you do like a price addendum. Sometimes if you have the opening instructions signed like after your
Yeah.
price addendum,
Yeah,
the buyers will be like, well, no, we negotiated this. And
yeah.
then I have to explain, no, this was when we opened escrow. These were the terms.
Just so you know, Chaz, I have seen it with like the initial right check, and then the other, it'll say here preliminary pre-approval interest rate, or say preliminary.
that's a good way.
That's what they
I
do.
like
They do in
that.
the description, they'll
Mhm.
check, right? And then they'll do, if they're not necessarily aware, they'll do other, and they'll do preliminary, blah, 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 and they'll just kind of do like a little statement there.
Okay,
Oh.
I like that.
Okay, did everybody get that? So Louisa is recommending, the question was, is this information here binding? So Louisa was explaining that, yes, it will go on the opening instructions. However, once closing happens, all of that is adjusted to what actually happened. But what you can also do is when you hop over here to the additional terms, you can check the other box here and then just type in preliminary approval, so that it kind of states, look, this is what we're working with, but it might not be the end
The final.
final
I like that.
situation.
Thank you.
So if that makes you,
Preliminary approval rate.
right, yeah, preliminary approval rate or whatever. So that way you're saying, you know what, this might change.
Yeah, because
Okay.
it usually always does.
It does.
So I'm like, I don't put it in there. I don't want it to be binding.
Yes. We have a final
Yes.
internal amendment.
Okay, and then you have, what is this here? That's weird.
That is weird.
Oh, and you, on the left, you have the little, all the way down, yeah. Right.
Oh.
That.
Oh, okay, all right, well, I'm just gonna ignore it. Okay, so now we have if VA or FHA checked, deliver a list of lender required repairs within 17, or you can change that, days after acceptance. Now, I believe Ashley is
Yeah.
dealing with some lender required repairs.
Genevieve.
Now, on the contract, the buyer actually agreed to deliver that list within 17 days. If that list is not delivered in 17 days, what do we do? Anybody? notice to perform. Notice to perform. And I know this feels like an aggressive or mean thing to do, especially when the agent is maybe being very nice and it's very cordial. But I want you to reframe your thinking on this because a notice to perform is simply letting the other side, the other agent know, look, we need to have some sort of a resolution to get this contract back in compliance. Because when timelines are missed, when, you know, the contingency removal date has passed for your inspection, and then it passes for the appraisal, and then it passes for the loan, and the contract's not being kept compliant either with an extension or the removal itself, then things could get really messy. You lose your power in the transaction if you are sitting there with a contract that's out of compliance. You lose all the ability you have to represent your client. And your client is the most important person in this thing because you wouldn't be here without them. So when, and I'm not even saying what if, I'm saying when you're the other side, or, you know, let's say you're representing the buyer. If you cannot remove the contingency on the contingency removal date, then keep your contract in compliance by submitting an extension. It's so easy, and it keeps you keeping your power, your ability to negotiate. It's just so important.
Bobby,
I
on that one too, like the contingency dates for all of them, regardless of whichever side you guys are on,
Yeah.
it's really good practice if you're working with the TC or even just doing it yourself to have it that there'll be a reminder sent out to the other party the day before something's due, another one sent out the day it's due, and a conversation to be had probably the day before or the day of, if you feel like they're not going to be able to do it for whatever reason, having an actual phone conversation with the other side and say, hey, what are you going to do about this? Like if they're, like, send over a request for an extension if you need one. You don't necessarily have to tell them if you're going to grant it, but at least it's on paper then. And it can be reviewed and it can be determined whether that's going to be allowed or not. You know what I mean? And if they're just being like really bad about responding back, they're not cooperating, you already know they're not going to do it, stuff like that, you can send the demand for the buyer or the seller to perform up to 2 days before the thing is due. So like if it's due on Friday, you could send it Wednesday and say, hey, you have 2 days to get this done by the date it's due. You don't even have to wait until the day it's due.
I'm glad you brought that up because that's a really, I would prefer that every agent do it that way because that takes the, oh, I'm being mean factor out. All you're doing is you are preparing them to either remove the contingency or send over the extension on the date that it should be sent.
You just have to be careful with that one because a lot of times the other side won't read it that way. And if you don't explain and have a conversation before, they're going to get that and they're going to get pissed. And if they were cooperative before, well, now they're not going to be. Now they're just going to be belligerent. Now they're just going to be mad. Now they're not going to want to work with you. You have to explain it. You have to
Yes.
You have to prep people before you send that.
Definitely. But there's, I've had agents talk to me. They'll just give me a call and they'll say, hey, look, I'm going to send over a notice to perform. Please do not get upset over it. It's just to keep I have to do it because my broker said, or I have to do it just to keep the contract, compliant or whatever. And I never took it like aggressively. The only time that I did is when it was meant aggressively, because you can send them aggressively. But if you're really just trying to do your job and do the best job that you can for your client, there's a million ways that you can talk to the other side and make them feel like, look, it's not, it's just paperwork. Don't worry about it. Just give me what I need to have and we'll be fine. So yeah, thank you for that too.
The reminders help so much because people just forget. They have too much
Yeah.
stuff going on.
Oh, yeah, and if you're doing like 3 or 4 transactions, oh my God, it's really difficult to remember everything, even if you have a TC. So, and a lot of times the TC is the one that gets the notice anyway, so it doesn't really even, go to the agent necessarily, depending how closely they work with their TC.
I do
All
have
right.
a question
Yeah.
though. When you're working with a buyer, do you try to hold on to that removal of all contingencies as long as you can? Or do you do it the day of? Like as a buyer's agent, I hold on to it as long as I can because we're always up until the end. You don't know if you're getting that loan approved.
That's true.
So,
That's true.
as when I'm working with of course, I represent the buyer different than I represent the seller. But if I'm representing the buyer, I'm holding off on that as long as I can. And oftentimes, more often than not, I can hold on to it till the end.
And they never give you a notice because they're afraid. Right.
Mhm.
You know what? Did you guys hear what Chastity said? She will hold on to it. If they don't tell her to send it, she's not sending it. And I think a lot of us have that same mentality. If nobody's going to make me, I'm not going to do it because guess what? If we get to the end and that loan doesn't go through and I haven't removed one contingency and nobody made me, I'm getting my deposit back, damn it. So that is a clear picture of how we all think when
But as a
when we're
seller's
in there.
agent,
Yeah.
I want it removed right away. Right? So I'm different. It depends on what hat I have on because I'm representing my client to the best of my ability.
Exactly. And if nobody's gonna make me remove those contingencies, I'm not either.
No.
Yeah.
I'll send them over on the day of closing. Here you go.
And sometimes if you send them a few contingency removals one by one, like they even forget that you haven't done them all. Like if you do the inspection one and then the appraisal one and then like disclosures one, you do them separately. They almost a lot of times think that they have them all, and
Right.
that loan one's the last one to go, man.
Yeah.
Hold on to that.
Yes. Yes. Good one. Thank you for that. Thank you. All right, moving along. Additional financed amount, this usually doesn't apply. We don't see a lot of seconds, and this does not apply to any down payment assistance. This is like if the seller's financing, and again, not very common, but it's the same little form here. You would not complete it if this doesn't apply. Occupancy type. If it's primary, you don't check anything. If it's secondary or investment, you want to check the correct box. This has tax implications. All right, these boxes down here, those are pre-calculated, so it'll take what you put in and calculate out. You can check your math using these. And then we hop over to G1. This is where they've hidden the seller credit to buyer. Trust me, it's not very obvious. If the buyer needs a bit of a credit from the seller to close or for down payment, if it's for down payment, they cannot use this because this is for closing costs only. You would put the amount right here and you check this box. Other seller credits, payments, does not include buyer broker compensation. So if you want the seller to credit for something else, this is where you can put in what you want the credits for. So
That would be like if there's like a credit for like bad carpet. or for a
Yeah.
new roof, or even for a buy down for the buyer.
Yeah,
Something that's specific, that's not just closing costs, but specific.
like solar or something like that.
Yeah.
Okay, and then the third box here, this is for the compensation. So you would check that if you're asking the seller to pay your fee. And then you go over here, seller agrees to pay buyer's broker out of the transaction proceeds, percent of the final purchase price, and if applicable, a dollar amount or just a dollar amount if checked here. So you can put the percentage that you're asking for here. If you usually ask for a TC fee or something like that, you can add that here. And then if it's just a flat dollar amount, maybe it's land or something, then you just check this box and you put the whole amount right here. Verification of all cash. Okay, so when you submit an offer, you have a certain amount of time to show the seller that your buyer qualifies to buy. So we saw on the other page, they have 3 days to submit the deposit. Here, we're running into some timelines again. So you can either include this with your offer, or you can opt to send it over within 3 days of acceptance. Okay, so verification of all cash. If you're making a cash offer and you don't include proof of funds, a bank statement, your 401k, whatever, then you need to provide that within 3 days of acceptance. If you want the 3-day option, you do need to check the box because attached to the offer is the default. If you have another amount of days that you'd like to put in there, then fill this out right here. Same with the verification of down payment and closing costs. Even if you're not using all cash, you still need to show the seller that the buyer has enough money to cover the down payment and the closing costs, whatever you're not asking the seller to cover. So attach it to the offer or check this box 3 days or however many days after acceptance. And then lastly, verification of loan application. You want to include your pre-approval. Then if you're unclear whether it's a pre-qual, pre-approval, or a fully underwritten pre-approval, then just talk to your lender. Like I say, you're making this in cooperation with the lender. So just make sure you know exactly what you're including with the offer. And you can submit an offer without any of that and just let them know you'll provide it within 3 days. So none of these are needed to make an offer. Like sometimes you're in a hurry, you're shopping on a weekend and your lender's not available or something like that, but you want to get that offer in, you can. This allows you to do that and just get that to them on Monday or whatever. All right, final verification of condition. These are your timelines. So you're saying that your buyer is going to do their final walkthrough 5 days before escrow closes. So if you want to change that, this is your opportunity to do so. 5 days is usually pretty good. It's right before closing, and it gives the seller time to make those repairs. If you had a request for repairs, it gives the seller time to do that. You don't want to do your walkthrough too soon because then things won't be done. And you don't want to close escrow without verifying that everything that you expected to works. All right, and then assignment request, 17 days after acceptance. So all these have like a default timeline, but you can change them. Oh, I guess I unshared accidentally. All right, we are out of time though. I'd like to pick this up next week, although next week we are going to have a special escrow presentation. answering those really important questions for our escrow officer, Louisa. And so we can actually pick this up the following Tuesday.
We can go over my part of escrow, the contract.
Yeah, we could go over Louisa's part of it. So
The contract, yeah.
yeah. All right. Does anyone have any quick questions? I know I took it to the limit here. All right. If there are no questions, then we will see you next week.